Hi, it's Paul again. I just wanted to talk today about what kind of a story that you might want to write. When I started this particular novel that I'm working on now, it was November 2011, and I didn't know what kind of a story I wanted to write. And it took a long time before I nailed down some of the big brushstrokes of what I wanted to tell. I knew the kind of impact of the story. I knew most of the content that I needed to get started, but I wasn't sure of certain things. I didn't know what genre to say it was in, and everyone else seemed to know. You know, other people were doing sort of something gothic or steampunk or psychological drama, and I just didn't know. You know, and I realized that the material that I had, the stuff I was thinking about, I could have, I could have pitched it in a number of different directions. And at the time it felt terrible. At the time it felt like I was incapable of making a decision. I look back on that time now and I think, wow, what a potential, what a moment of real potential that was. The potential that was there at that moment when I was thinking, what is this? What could it be? It was massive. It could have gone in any direction. I could have written a romance, and there are romance elements in the novel. I could have written a thriller, and there are thriller elements in the novel. I could have written, a whole bunch of different genre versions of this story. The fact that there seemed to be a big smorgasbord of different genre elements in the story, I don't know. I don't know how that helps me. I don't know whether that means that I'm writing something that's basically a mainstream novel because it's got so many different elements. It's neither fish nor fowl. It's not one genre or another, or whether it's going to make it hard for people to kind of get why they want to read it. I don't know yet. So I need to find that out when I go to market. But I did think this. In the world of internet marketing, there's a process called repurposing, and you repurpose your content. So you get maybe so I could shoot a video like this, and then I could save the video, and I have a video. Then I can just separate out the audio track and save that as an MP3, and then I've got an audio track. Then I could get it transcribed, and then I've got the transcription, so I've got some text. I could turn that text into an article, then I've got an article. I could turn it into a checklist, then I've got a checklist. I could turn it into a whole bunch of things. I could turn it into an interactive test. I could turn it into anything you can think of. So the whole idea about repurposing content is one that is familiar to me from that angle. Years and years ago, there was a TV series, a mini series. I think it had 4 parts, 4 episodes, and it was called Chimera, as in the mythical beast Chimera. It was billed as this science fiction horror kind of thing, and I watched a bit of it, and it was okay actually. I really liked the first 2 episodes. What blew it for me was when the kind of the horrible monster, the Chimera, made an appearance. And then it was kind of a bit low budget, and it didn't have the impact that was being promised by the build-up. So it kind of fell flat for me, and it's always stuck in my mind as a missed opportunity. But I read a fantastic interview by the guy who wrote it. His name escapes me right now, but he said, "Oh, well, it was very nearly a romance or a kind of a detective story, and it just so happened that the version that got accepted by the TV companies was the science fiction horror version." And I really pricked up my ears when I heard this, because I was like, what does he mean, version? And I was on the lookout for this guy in any shape or form giving an interview to try and shed some light into what he was saying. And he basically, in another interview, said, I had the idea for the story about genetic experimentation, and this is way back in 1990, late 80s, early 90s. And so I drafted out the outline of the story, he said, and to maximize the chance of it getting picked up or published, or made into a TV series. I did a romance version, I did a detective version, I did a horror version, I did a science fiction version, and then I did these hybrid versions. And I was like, wow, this guy took the time to re-outline, to re-pitch, to reposition his story to appeal to different genres each time. And he sent it out there in a number of different forms to see which one was going to get picked up. And that really opened my eyes. Ever since then, I've realized that a story has a massive amount of potential until you pin it down and decide this is what it's going to be. How does this help you? Well, at that stage when you don't know what your story is going to be, and you don't know which direction it's going to go, and you don't know what genre it is, don't worry. Don't worry about. Don't get hung up on. I don't know yet. Do all of them. Do an outline where this story is a romance. Do another outline where it's a detective story. Do another one where it's a horror story. Do another one where it's science fiction. Do another one where it's a thriller. Do another one where it's an action movie. As many as you want. And don't throw them away. And do not think for a moment that just because you end up writing and publishing a version of the story in one form, in one genre, that don't imagine for a minute that you can't go back and publish the same story in a different format, in a different genre. You can use that material again. So that really opened my eyes. So that in a way that makes it more exciting when you get to that stage where you have the that big decision to make about what kind of a thing is it that you're going to write. And it's cool because some of the best literature in the world ever written has been a hybrid of genres that I think only kind of comes about because someone has considered it in this genre and considered it in that genre, and then they've merged the two. And maybe that doesn't come about unless you start thinking in terms of, how can I repurpose this story for different genres? And the one I'm thinking of in particular is by my all-time favorite writer, pretty much. There are a couple, you probably hear me say a few times different names for my all-time favorite writer, but Stanisław Lem, the Polish science fiction writer, is one of the most outstanding writers of all time. And he wrote a story called Solaris, which got turned into two films, one by Tarkovsky back in the 60s, which is good, and then another one by George Clooney more recently, which was also good. But Solaris is so many things. It's a science fiction story, but it also has very strong romance and tragedy elements, which make it, which in my eyes elevate it way above, a lot of classics. A lot of things that are considered to be absolute classics in literature. I see Solaris as being up there and above a lot of those. So there's some fantastic tragedy in Shakespeare. There's Dr. Zhivago is a fantastic love tragedy, and Solaris is way up there among them, if not above them. And it's a hybrid. If you've never read Solaris, why not pick it up and have a read? It's one of those novels that when I read it, it changed the way I thought about literature, because it opened my eyes. Now, science fiction buffs who know more about it than I do will say, well, yeah, of course there are hybrids, and of course there are, science fiction romances and stuff like that. And maybe there were ones before, and maybe there were ones afterwards. Okay. I think it's the best one that I've ever read, and for that reason alone, I recommend it to read. But also as an example of, when you're reading whatever it is you love to read, be on the lookout for these examples of merged genres and opportunities to repurpose. You could tell this story as a, so The Big Sleep is a detective novel, but what if it was a romance? Think of a genre western, cowboy and Indian film, and then repurpose that into a romance. And I keep coming back to romance, but that's one of the easier ones to imagine or to reimagine a story as. Anyway, there's food for thought, okay? And I'm almost going to head for home now because I've done so much painting and sanding and filling and that I'm all tuckered out, as they say. So anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.